everyone, and welcome to another episode of Little Give. I'm super excited about our guest today. We're going to talk a lot about animals. Go ahead, introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from. Tell us what you're all about.
Hi, well, my name is David Mark Quigley. Originally, I'm from New Zealand. I now reside in Naples, Florida. And so I'm a best-selling author. I'm an oracular consultant, and I've done peak performance consulting for some considerable time. But my real passion is about writing and writing about wildlife preservation. So I actually have my own wildlife foundation, the Quigley Wildlife Foundation, and a percentage of the royalties that comes from my book series, my Wildlife, the African series, goes to wildlife foundations around the world. And so that's one of the ways that I like to give back. Some people, they just don't know how to donate to a worthy cause. And so I take that away from them and I allow them to allow me to donate on their behalf to wildlife foundations and other nonprofits around the world through just a simple purchase of one of my books. So that is a bit of a summary of who I am and what I do.
Well, tell us, how did you get started with this? It's such a cool thing.
Okay, I suffer from severe dyslexia. And I was predisposed genetically to exhibit dyslexia, but I had a blunt force trauma incident when I was very young, and I damaged the left side of my head, and it started exhibiting there. I have never passed an English test in my life, and I only read my first book when I was 23 years of age. And so my schooling was very difficult. And as soon as I left school, I shied away from anything academic, and I went into farming in New Zealand. And so that's where I thought my future resided, because I didn't want to see another word. I didn't want to try and read anything because I had a great deal of difficulty breaking words up into syllables. And so it was the temporal parietal area of my brain that was damaged, and that is the phonological part of the brain that didn't allow me to break those words into those little phenoms, those little sound bites of the words, and I couldn't recognize them. I also damaged the occipital occipital temporal area of the brain, and I had trouble visualizing words. So any written word was difficult for me. Went overseas when in my early 20s, and I ended up in Africa. And there were certain events that happened that made me realize that I wanted to give back to the wildlife in Africa. I eventually came back to New Zealand after reading my first book, and it opened up a whole new world to me. What I did is I went and studied and gained a diploma in clinical hypnotherapy, and I started writing my first book. And as I was writing my first book, I started repairing these damaged pathways in my brain, and I started to be able to find that I could actually string a sentence together. And so the very first book that I wrote was called Scars of the Leopard. And it was basically followed my travels around the world. And a lot of it resided when I was living in Johannesburg and in Africa. And so through that event of getting the diploma in clinical hypnotherapy, as well as writing the book, it allowed me to repair some of those neurological pathways through neuroplasticity. And I was able to begin on my writing career. And also with my diploma, I started a peak performance consultancy, and I learned the power of the subconscious mind. And through the writing and through the peak performance consultancy, which A lot of it was to do with regressing my clients to find out those events that were holding them back and not allowing them to form at peak levels. I discovered the power of the subconscious mind. And so using those two things basically allowed me to embark on that writing career and embark on a lifetime of being a serial entrepreneur.
Wow, that's such an inspiration for those people out there who are struggling with dyslexia and different things that they're going through that maybe prevent them from being, the learner that's in the box to say that you're perfect. So I think that's so incredible about you. What made you feel so comfortable in sharing that journey?
Well, because a lot of people look upon dyslexia as a handicap. It is the biggest gift that I was given. It opened up a whole new world. And basically what happened was I was very right hemisphere compensating. So I was very intuitive. But when I started writing and when I started working as in my peak performance consultancy and repairing those pathways on the left side of my brain, the right side maintained the superior level that it had, but it was only enhanced by the left. And so I realized, hang on a minute, this is something that needs to be shared. The books that I write are, while they are works of fiction, they have anecdotal stories within them about living a better life. And so while I will choose a character and the character would be a endangered species and a human character that basically looks after them, those stories gave back to me because of what I experienced in Africa, and I was able to relive that. But also by me being able to write these stories, I was then able to form my nonprofit and give back to those wildlife foundations. In Africa, we've recently given to two foundations. One is the Tiki Hayward Foundation, and the other is the Kevin Richardson Foundation, the Lion Whisperer. So we've given funds from my royalties to be able to give back. And so the journey for me began with dyslexia. And that's why I needed to bring it into the open so I can share what I do and so people can realize that not only that they can give to wildlife causes by simply buying one of my books, but they can see that, hang on a minute, if they have dyslexia, maybe it's not the handicap after all, and that it can be used for greater purposes. Because if you look at a lot of the entrepreneurs throughout the world, a large percentage of them are dyslexic.
Hi, my name is Justin Clark, and I'm the president of the board of directors for Driving Single Parents, a 501c3 nonprofit serving the citizens of San Antonio and Bexar County, Texas. I'm here today to tell you a little bit about the great work that our organization is doing for the citizens of San Antonio. What you're about to see is just a few photos and videos of the way that we're changing lives for single parents in and around San Antonio, Texas. Our first giveaway took place in April of 2017, just one short month after the formation of our organization. John, a Bexar County resident, was the victim of a horrible drunk driver incident. He and his daughter survived the crash, and we were so proud to give our first car to this deserving family. Fast forward to 2020, a very difficult year for nonprofits. We were able to secure 4 vehicles for single parents in need. Our organization, including our board of directors, list of partners, and portfolio of people we've been able to help in San Antonio, continues to grow, and it's all thanks to donors and local community organizations that have helped us along the way. This giveaway took place in 2021 and shows that we continue to help single parents even after the struggles brought about by COVID-19. Because of limited funds and the overwhelming need, we at Driving Single Parents are incredibly selective with the people we help. Some are victims of domestic violence. Others had a spouse pass away tragically, or otherwise fell on hard times. These single parents show adversity in the face of challenge and aren't looking for a handout. We offer a hand up and help get them back in the driver's seat. Many of the single parents we help go on to graduate college, get promotions, get married, mentor others, and some have even been so touched by the gift we gave them that they have decided to join our board of directors to pay it forward and ensure the continued growth of our organization. If you would like to help our organization continue to grow and continue to help single parents in need in San Antonio, Texas, and Bexar County, Texas, we would really appreciate your support. Please visit us online at www.drivingsingleparents.org. Thank you.
Yeah, that's so true. My mind is blown right now because I think, so often people can use that as a limiting belief. Like, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I'm dyslexic, or I'm sorry, I can't do it. I have ADD, which I have. So I think it's so interesting and inspiring about you that now you've become an author, that you've done all these amazing things and a nonprofit founder. And sometimes people can use those things and say, I can't because. And so tell the audience a little bit about like what it is about you specifically that has been able to push through that self-limiting belief and be able to do all these amazing things.
Okay, so one of the things that I discovered when I was beginning to write, I couldn't spell to save myself. And it was because I couldn't break up those words into syllables. So what I did is I set a high, hard goal. And that high, hard goal was to become an international renowned best-selling adventure novelist. And I have actually achieved that with several of my books. But when I set that goal, I was so far away from being able to achieve that. I couldn't type, I couldn't spell. And so I had to break it down into incremental segments, very small goals, and slowly work up to achieving that goal. And where it began was learning how to recognize words and basically spell them. So I would have numerous dictionaries and thesauruses, and I would begin writing, and I may use one descriptive word, but then I would find out what the synonym for that particular word was, and I would change it. And eventually I discovered that after 20 or 50 times of repeating this word, I would, depending on the context, I would actually be able to learn it and I would understand it. And so when I was doing that, because of that struggle, when I began to write, I would lapse into flow. We've all heard about flow. And so initially, when I was learning, my prefrontal cortex was very active. But once I lapsed into flow, we got into an area where the prefrontal cortex sort of slowed down, and I was able to focus fully on what I was doing. And that's when neuroplasticity kicked in and those pathways were repaired or built, and I was able to start remembering those words. And it's very rare for me now in the English language to come upon a word that I've never seen before. And so one of the things with dyslexic people, they're very good at spatial context. And the way that it worked for me was I would see a sentence or I would write a sentence, but I understood the space around the words, and I was able to have that contextual understanding of that sentence and being able to change it and develop it into a paragraph, into a chapter, into a book. And so I was using the right side of my brain to be able to do that, which helped repair those things, those two areas of my brain that basically allowed me to recognize words visually, put them in the right context, and then allowed me to understand what they were.
Well, I mean, we all know, I mean, I know that you're wildly successful now, and we're going to definitely dive into that. But real quick, could you maybe talk to a kid out there that's maybe going through dyslexia themselves and they're feeling like, I'm stupid, or someone's told them that they're not good enough? How can you give them some words of advice on how they can navigate their own journey to where they can see that somebody like you has been able to accomplish all that you have, and that it's possible for them too?
Okay, I'm going to give them a real simple exercise that they can use to basically develop it. And so it all begins, and they can actually, there's a download, free download on my my website, davidmarkquigley.com. It's called the 7-Day Journal. And the premise of it is, if you can articulate a question, you already have the knowledge to have it answered. And if you are dyslexic, you are probably very right brain compensated. You are very right brain, you're very intuitive. And so if you take this journal and you use it, and every night you write down a question, but don't expect to have the answer. Just write it down and put a question mark. And it could be any question. It could be, how could I spell better? How could I find, or it could be like, how could I find my purpose in life? Or it could be anything, any question that you want answered. Write it down, put a question mark, and then put the journal aside, put the pen aside, and just do that before you go to bed at night, and allow your mind, your subconscious mind, to bring that answer. Now, that answer may come to you in the morning, or it may come a week later, or it may come a month later. And you may have to do it for over a series of times. But as I said, if you can articulate a question, you already have the knowledge to have it answered. And what will happen is you will be put in a position where you may hear a conversation that answers the question, or somebody may come to you and you may, or they may offer you help. And so it is your mind, your own mind, that is going to give you the resources to answer that particular question. And so that's probably one of the most simplest things that I can offer, and that I got a lot of my peak performance clients to actually do. It's just a subconscious trigger. Just ask questions. Don't expect the answer, and allow your subconscious mind to bring you that answer. And it will bring you the answer in the time and in the fashion and in the manner that is appropriate for you.
Hi, my name is Andrew Fraley, and I believe that sometimes we all need a little bit of help. If you're in the San Antonio community and you need some legal help, call me at 210-725-4658.
Oh my goodness. What a great tip. I love to say think in ink, and I think that's just kind of what you described there. It can really, really help you. I have one more question on the subject, then we're going to move on to all the amazing things that you have created in your life. But I oftentimes have heard people with dyslexia say that people make fun of them because they can't spell, and like, oh, you can't spell, and all of these really, limiting beliefs that they're told throughout their whole lives because they have dyslexia. What would you say to a kid who's experienced that?
Well, I'm actually going to give you an example. I went to an all-boys boarding school in Christchurch, New Zealand, and we had this geography teacher, and he would get a boy to stand up in class and read a text to the rest of the class. And I dreaded it. I hated it because I just couldn't read. And I remember one I can still feel it now. He chose me. I had to stand up in class and I had to read this text about whatever country or whatever place that we were studying at the time. And there was a boy behind me. God bless him. His name was Andrew Russell, and he whispered the text to me that allowed me to read it, and it was a godsend. And so the only thing is that I would say is that people with dyslexia, it's not a handicap. It's actually a gift that you've been given, because of the opportunities that it's going to give you. And you'll have a purpose, and you've just got to discover that purpose. And you know inside yourself what that purpose is, but you've got to find it. And so it gets back to asking that question. If you can articulate a question, you already have the knowledge to have it answered. So write it out, write the question, whatever it is that you want to discover, and you will discover what your purpose is, and it will be an incredibly special one, believe me.
Oh, great advice. I think oftentimes people who don't understand dyslexia, they think that it's a choice, like someone's being lazy or they're not, taking enough time to like do their spelling bee or spelling words and all those things. And I think it's just so important for people to realize that it's not a choice, because if somebody with dyslexia could choose to know how to spell really well and do all these things, they would, because it's a very hard thing to grow through as you're going through your childhood and through the traditional academic, requirements. So I'm so grateful that you shared all of that today. Now I want to talk about you. Oh my goodness, you're wildly successful, and I'm so excited to hear more about you and your journey. So talk to us about the books, talk to us about all the things that you're doing.
Okay, so I have a book series called the African Series, and it has a prequel, which is Scars of the Leopard, that followed this misfit around the world. Then that misfit happened to be me. The first book in the series then is The Last Rhino. And The Last Rhino is free on Amazon, so you can actually go and download it for free. And then the next book is White Gold. So, well, the first book, The Last Rhino, is actually about a real rhino preservation program, Operation Stronghold, that was undertaken in the Zambezi Valley in the 1980s in Zimbabwe. And basically it's a fictitious story about this operation where they actually did relocate over 300 rhinos to safer locations throughout Zimbabwe. And so I wrote that book and put it free on Amazon, so people can download it as a Kindle and they can get a feel for how I write and what I write. And this particular book is the first in the sequence. It then goes to White Gold, and White Gold is about ivory poaching. And all my books are based in fact. They may have fictitious characters, but it's based in fact of what actually happens and the devastation that happens with the poaching of these endangered species. And so White Gold goes through ivory poaching. The next one is the African lion, and the African lion is a story about the resurrection of the Barbary lions. They're an extinct species of lions that were on the Barbary coast area, and it walks through their resurrection and eventually their preservation in Zimbabwe. The next book, which I finished, is called The Last Scales, which I haven't published yet. We're about to present it to a publisher. And The Last Scales is about pangolin poaching. Now, pangolins are known as scaly anteaters, or otherwise known as scaly anteaters, and they're the most poached mammal in the world. And it goes through the discovery of this particular poaching ring, and it's tracked through to the perpetrator, which is a Chinese company, and its eventual dismantling, and then the setting up of the preservation of pangolin sanctuaries throughout southern and eastern Africa. And I'm also 3/4 of the way through my next book, which is called 2000 Rhinos, which is about the southern rhinos, the white rhinos, and how they have been treated and how they've been hunted nearly to extinction, and how they're making this miraculous comeback. And so hopefully by the end of this year, I will have finished that book and put it to publishers as well. So
Tell us a bit about how you got to be so passionate about animals and why this
Okay,
is your
I'll tell
work.
you the story, Cindy. So I was
Yes, I
in
can't wait.
Botswana, and I was in the Chobe National Park, and I was in a section of the Chobe National Park called Zanin, and I was on safari. I'd been on safari for, oh gosh, it was coming up for a month or so, and I was on a Land Rover with a few other individuals. We came around this corner on this dirt track, and here was this full-maned lion following this lioness in heat. And the lion turned around, looked at our Land Rover, and took one look at us and charged at the Land Rover.
Oh.
And the person driving the Land Rover put it in reverse and was going back as fast as it could, but it was as if we were standing still. Now, I was on the game viewing roof on top of the Land Rover with two other people at the time. Those two people stumbled down through the game viewing hatch, locked it behind themselves, and left me on the game viewing hatch. And I witnessed this massive lion running straight at me. It was running so fast that it smashed into the bull bars of the Land Rover, shunted us back further. But during that time, I was in my element. And all I was focused on was getting a photograph of this lion charging towards us. And I got the photograph of a lifetime. But it was during that time that I realized, no, I need to share these sort of experiences. And actually, that was probably the very first time that I ever experienced flow. There was no fear. There was no anxiety. I was just so focused on getting this photograph of this lion. It was an incredible experience. And so from that point on, I felt I had an affinity. I mean, I suppose it was all he had to do was to jump and I was gone, but it never did. And so that is one of the pivotal moments in my experience going through the wilds of Africa. And after that, I felt I needed to really share what I experienced during that time and subsequent times.
Wow, I'm so glad you did. I'm here reliving it with you. Like, why would you do that? I would be like probably running as well. Like seems like it'd be such a scary situation, but you didn't take it that way. You took it as a moment to have an opportunity to not only enjoy that moment, but also take a picture. That's really, really cool.
Yep.
And then to make this whole line of books
Yep.
because this experience.
Yes.
Tell us what made you want to start writing books.
Well, the reason why I started writing books was because I wanted to learn how to spell. That was the first reason. But then when I started it, that I could string a sentence together, and I can sit in front of my computer and 4 hours can go by in a flash. And so it is such a rich and rewarding experience personally for me, but also I find from people who have read my books and what they've got out of it, that experience that I have is it's like I'm imparting a part of me and my energy to the reader. And so I took it to the next step of establishing the Quigley Wildlife Foundation. And so one of the last nonprofits that we donated to is, as I said before, the Tiki Hayward Foundation. And the money that we donated is actually going for GPS trackers on the rehabilitated pangolins that were they were saved and they were brought back to health and they were released back into the wild. And there's GPS trackers put on it. And so the money that the Quigley Wildlife Foundation and my readers gave through the royalties has gone to tracking the mammal of the last book that I wrote about. And so to help preserve them and help know where they are in the wilds and keeping them safe.
Oh, such a cool story. So not everybody's meant to be a nonprofit founder. Tell us what it is about you that got you to the level that you said, you know what, I'm going to turn this into a nonprofit and try to help. Tell us about that.
Well, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've done quite a lot of things in my life, and it was just second nature for me to set up the Wildlife Foundation. And people ask me, you know, setting up the Wildlife Foundation is pretty difficult. Well, nobody told me it was going to be difficult, and so I just went and did it and established it. And so I have myself and 4 other directors. So it's not my decision. It's a decision of the directors of where we donate to. And so, you know, I went through the process of setting it up, and I submitted the paperwork to the IRS, the Inland Revenue Service, so it could be registered as a nonprofit. And it was pretty seamless for me. It was extremely easy to put in place, and it was a logical thing for me to do. And because now I just funnel a percentage of the royalties to the Wildlife Foundation, and then the great part about it is, okay, where are we going to donate now? Who are we going to give to? And it gives you a real buzz. It really does, because of the good that it can do.
I love that. I love that we can all do good in little ways, no matter what it is. And seems like what you're doing is a big way. I want to switch off to my little gift questions now, just because we're right in that wheelhouse. So why don't you tell the audience how there's a little thing that they can do in their community that might just be, you know, a little give on their end, but might make a big impact on the other side?
Well, I mean, there are several things that you can do. I mean, I've spoken a lot about my books. And so one of the ways that you can give to wildlife that is endangered is by purchasing one of my books. And by doing that, a percentage is going to the Quigley Wildlife Foundation, and we're going to donate it on your behalf to a worthy cause. And our directors will determine where it basically goes. And so that is a simple way of, if you like reading, if you would like adventure, if you like wildlife, that's a simple way of giving back. And because we're going to give it away on your behalf. And so, and then there are other ways in the community of volunteering for some of these wildlife and animal shelters that, animals are a pretty important part of our life. And a lot of the animals that I write about are keystone species. And what are keystone species? Keystone species are critical to the environment that they live in, and their passing, or if they go extinct, isn't just going to be a sad reflection that those animals are no longer in that environment. There is going to be a flow-on effect to man. It's going to affect us. And so one of the last books that I wrote, the last Scales, is about the pangolin, the scaly anteaters, and they're insectivores. And so they eat insects, and they eat a lot of insects to get the nutrition that they need to survive. And one of the reasons that they are the most poached mammal in the world is because it was written hundreds of years ago in ancient Chinese and Asian medicine that their scales could be ground up and used for traditional medicine, and the scales don't actually do anything. And so it's all about education to help realize that no, it's not actually doing anything. But if that mammal passed, then those insects are going to proliferate, and the crops in those areas are going to be ravaged by insects, and there's going to be a flow-on effect of the people that put those crops in. There's going to end up being famine, and there's going to be starvation, and there's going to be death. So I write about those keystone species, and as I said, You just need to purchase a book, and you're going to be able to have a percentage of that purchase to go to a worthy cause that is going to help eventually mankind, because we need these keystone species. And, you know, not all of us can go to Africa and help those animals to lead a better life. And so sometimes it means just starting at home, volunteering at a animal shelter or something like that. And by, you know, what you give, you're going to get back. And so it may not be this week, it may not be this month or this year, but if you can give, you're eventually going to receive. So whatever you give, you will get back.
Exactly. Like those little gifts really do make a big impact. Why don't you tell the audience about a time in your life where maybe somebody did something little for you that might have been, you know, a little give on their end, but really made an impact on you and in your life?
Well, I suppose for me, it really, because dyslexia has been such a big part of my life, it basically I started writing my book, and I didn't know if it was going to be, if I could do it, but I started writing the book, and I had a friend who would come and sit with me, and I would read him the book. And it was his encouragement that made me initially realize that, hey, this is pretty good. You know what you're writing has a impact on me, and you know, he was the one that basically, I suppose, encouraged me to continue along my writing journey. And now, from that encouragement and that support that he gave me, you know, we've been able to donate thousands of dollars to wildlife causes around the world.
Ah, that's an incredible example. Thank you so much for sharing that with the audience, because you have to realize that there's something you do every day that may or may not impact somebody, and you get a choice. And look at that beautiful little thing that person did for you, and look at where it took you. So I love it. I love it so much. Thank you for sharing that. Why don't you tell the audience where they can reach you? They can find out more about you, your books, everything that you're working on.
Okay, so everything, you can find me really at davidmarkquigley.com. And so while we've talked a lot today about my writing and my nonprofit, one of the things that so everything is in my my website, davidmarkquigley.com. But one of the things that I discovered when I established my peak performance consultancy, and because it was based on regression therapy, basically taking people to those times in their life that had inhibited them from performing at peak levels and correcting those issues, I discovered that there is an inner energy that we all have that is attached or influenced by external environments. And so those, generally, the internal energy was more of a responding, it was a passive energy. Maybe they were at a time when it could have been they were in an accident, or whether they were in a traumatic experience or whatever. And those outside resources that impacted them could have been aggressive or creative. So there is a creative part of us, which is generally which allows us, propels us forward. But there's also this responding, nurturing part that needs to work together together to be able to have human action to be expressed. And so I learned that early on in my consultancy, that these three areas within our world needed to interact for us to be able to prosper and to perform at peak levels: external, internal, and human action. And so it was quite an eye-opener for me that because I've done hundreds, if not thousands, of regressions, and it just seemed to be this pattern that was there. And it was probably 15 years later that I discovered it was after a pretty horrific accident. I fell off a 2-story roof and ended up I was bedridden for 6 months while I was recovering. And while I was there, I came across the I Ching. And the I Ching is an ancient Chinese book. It's not religious. It is about the book of change. And it says that we all go through a cycle of change. And I found that what I had discovered 30 years ago was summed up in this ancient text about internal energy, external environments, and human action. And so the more I studied it, the more I realized that this ancient text basically reflected our modern world. And so this text was written in parables, it was written in metaphors and poetry, and it invoked imagery that allows people to understand how to gain balance in their life. And so this is one of the things that I do and I gain guidance with, which goes along with, if you can articulate a question, you already have the knowledge to have it answered. Sometimes you just need a little bit of help. And so the I Ching will allow a person to ask any question and to get an answer. And so I have used that extensively for the last 14 years. And one of the things that it allowed me to create was, after I fell off this roof and I was bedridden or recovering for 6 months, I kept asking the question, where do I go? Where do I go from here? And I discovered it kept saying, turn back, turn back, turn back. And I was living in Naples, Florida at the time. I ended up going back to New Zealand, and I used the I Ching guidance to create the largest asbestos consultancy in New Zealand and run it for 10 years. And so that's one of the entrepreneurial things that I've done. And I've used ancient guidance to live in the modern world. And because it has been so successful for me, I also use it when I'm stuck in a book. If I need inspiration to try to take it to another level or what have you, but it allows me to find answers that otherwise weren't there. And so that is one of the guidances that I help people all around the world with, and that is to answer pertinent questions and give them balance in the world. And so it's a huge tool for personal and business development.
Wow, that's so great that you're just using all the things that you've learned to like help give back and do more. So I just love that. Thank you for sharing.
So every week I do I put a reading up on YouTube, and it's guidance for the week for people to see how they can improve the balance in life. Because what the I Ching does is it allows people to avoid misfortune and enhance balance within their life. And that's really, if we can have balance, then we're going to be leading a pretty peaceful, pretty successful life.
Yeah, that's what we're all seeking, right?
Correct. Yep.
So why don't you tell the audience how they can help you? How can we help you be more successful and, continue to give back with your books and all the things that you're working on? Give us all the details.
Okay, really, the main thing, I suppose, Cindy, is to go back, is to go to my is go to my website, David Mark Quigley, and you'll find all the links to what I do. Whether it is wanting to purchase a book, that percentage will be donated to the Quigley Wildlife Foundation, or whether they want to listen to some of the free strategic analysis that I do for the coming week, or so that's where you can begin to find out more about me and basically what I do.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. If anybody out there who's watching wants to know more, go to his website, find out more, and also find out how you can get involved and donate. Donating $1 or $5 is really just a small gesture on your part, but really can, added by all the people we have watching this episode, can make a huge impact. So come on, give that little give. We're so grateful for you for being on today, David. We're just so thankful that you decided to spend your time with us. And I'm looking forward to seeing everyone who's watching today next week. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Little Give. If you would like to learn more about how I highlight ordinary people doing extraordinary things to help others, or maybe you'd like to be a guest, or maybe you know a nonprofit that you would like to see featured on a future episode of Little Give, you can find all the information on our website at littlegive.com. If you'd like to get involved with our kindness clip segment, please do send in those videos. Send them via email to cindy@littlegive.com, or you can tag us on any social media under Cindy Witteman or #LittleGive. If you'd like to know more about our podcast, you can also find us on all major streaming platforms under Little Give Podcast. Please do find our Facebook group under Little Give TV show and join it. We'd love to keep you up to date with future episodes. Thank you all so much for watching, and I can't wait to highlight the next ordinary person doing extraordinary things to help others. See you next time.